Greetings once again, and welcome to the part 5 of the in-depth tutorial on how to draw vectors of My Little Pony. So in this part of our tutorial, we're going to be learning probably, in my opinion, the most difficult, or at least the most complicated part of your vector, the eyes. The reason the eyes can be so difficult is the complicated process of trimming the eye and making sure that you get complete circles, or at least ovals within your vector that cut off at the right point. I don't know if that makes any sense right now, but it should in a few moments as I explain what we're going to be doing. Now, if you've been following along, you may have noticed I made a slight adjustment to her eyelash from the previous videos because I realized that I had ended it far too short, and I didn't want to bother you with trying to fix that during this tutorial. So, you should already have, again, the eyelashes and such drawn for your vector for the eye, and now we're going to be drawing the actual eye during this vector. That's all we're going to be doing, but that should actually be quite complicated. So, we're going to go ahead, and to do this, we're going to have to turn off our body fill so we can actually see behind what we've already drawn to our reference picture again, and we can see AJ's eye here and what she's doing. So we're actually going to go over to our ellipse tool here. Again, that's L shortcut if you want to use that. And pretty much we're just going to go ahead and set up our color fill a while. We're going to drag this over to be complete white and make sure it has no outline. And it's pretty simple. Normally I would suggest holding shift to create your circles with, but since again it's not a perfect circle, none of their eyes are except for Apple Bloom and other such young fillies. You can go ahead and just click and drag an approximate circle around about to the size you need. You're going to click on this, making sure you have your selection tool. You're going to want to turn this opacity down. I usually just do 50%. You can do whatever, but that's what I choose. And then you're going to use the selection tool to rotate your shape. Actually, am I on? Yes. I don't really like that this is a yellow layer, but we're going to let it go for now. Again, if you just hover over one of the corners, you can see this kind of corner arrow that shows up. And that's what you can use to rotate your object. Most of you should already know how to do that, but in case you didn't. And then we're just going to adjust the width and the length here of our shape to try to get it to match the outline or the outer edge of AJ's eye. And let's see, I'm going to zoom in a little bit more here. Now, what you have to consider is that though we want to make sure it's pretty much perfect around about the edge here, it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect elsewhere around the eyelash and such, because there is going to be a trick I show you that can be very useful for eyes such as Twilights and Rarities and other ponies that don't have the basic oval shape. Now, let's see. You know, I'm not going to nitpick with this too much. Normally I would, but I'm not going to for the rest of your sake. If you're having trouble getting the exact shape, you can always rotate it again, because usually if you're just not able to get it, it's probably a rotation issue. I'm going to go back and actually move that shape I just drew. You can't see it because it's white on white, unfortunately. But I'm going to drag that to the back so that way our eyelash, if you will, covers it. And I'm going to go ahead and actually adjust the width of this a while to 2 for now. I'm going to change the width profile. And let's see here. Again, if you look, let's turn off our visibility on our eyes quick. You can see, kind of, it's very pixelated, but you can see hopefully that it does taper out at the end here. It's kind of hard to notice with this because AJ's, in the direction she's looking, her pupil actually kind of blends in with the outline of her eyelash. But this does taper off just like the other eye that you can see here. Roundabout, I just kind of guessed in this area. But on the end here, it flattens out and almost conjoins with the furthest most eyelash. So we're going to mimic that with our drawing by using our width tool. But we don't actually have to. We could probably just, yep. So When you use width profile 4, just as a kind of a heads up, whatever direction you originally drew it, so if I drew it from this end and ended the line over here, this will be the wide end, and the place where you ended would always be the thinner part. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm just going to use my width tool, Shift W, and you don't actually have to click exactly where you want to go for this, because you can move it. I want to go ahead and say, since I know this is a 2-point width line, since I changed it to a 2-point width, I can then drag this over, and then this becomes the wide part, and the thin part is down here. So, with that done, it's not quite perfect. I had a little trouble with that, and again, I didn't want to mess with it too much for the sake of time, but we're going to say it looks beautiful for now. We're going to change these to width profile 4. Hopefully I remember to draw them in the right direction, but I didn't, so and this does happen, especially when I'm in a hurry. So we're going to change them back to the basic uniform width profile. Use the width tool, going to click on the anchor on the farthest point, change it to 0 width, and change all 3 of them. And though it's hard to see, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of our back. You can see that they do taper off quite nicely, and we'll fix the conjoining, as I mentioned earlier, of the eyelash and the eye later on. So we have our basic white outline. That's pretty good for now. Almost perfect, but not really. Let's see if I'm gonna leave it as it is. All right. So a simple way to do this, you don't have to, but you can control and paste, and then just change this to whatever color you need it to be. A quick note, if you're ever trying to copy something exactly, for example, this would be good for the nostrils if you're doing a front-on shot, since they're pretty much symmetrical and on the same line. Instead of copy-pasting and just trying to line it up, you can do something called Control-C and then Control-F, which is paste in front. So now it doesn't really look like I did anything, but if I go ahead and do transform, reflect, and that's again something I probably won't go over for you guys, but you can see here there's actually 2 of them, and it was exactly in front of her nostril that I drew originally. Nostril is such a horrible word. It sounds terrible. But anyway, another trick you can do is, I believe, hold in Alt. Yep. And holding in Alt while clicking on and dragging on an object creates a duplicate of it. So, quick fun facts. For this, I'm going to go over to my color reference that I had from the previous video. And I'm just going to go ahead and sample from the bottom part of her eye. It's not really any big deal which color we choose for right now. Double click on the swatch, paste that color back in. And again, just adjusting the size of this to try to match. We're going to have to rotate this back, even though it's more closer to a true circle than outside eye. And again, this is the part, very importantly, that's about right, where it doesn't matter that you're going outside of her eye here. It bleeds off because the full circle is off the picture, if you will, or outside her eye, so to speak. So to get that perfect circle look while keeping true to the direction and shape that she is looking in, you have to let it go off of this white space. I should really know the technical term for that, but I'm not an eye doctor. I know iris, I know pupil. I forget what the white space is called. So, sue me. I'm kidding, please don't. Anyway, Control F, pasting that in front, and we know that the pupil is black. Pretty much on everyone it's solid black. Almost everyone. Can't say that's true. I think Granny Smith doesn't have a completely solid black fill for her pupil. But that is a tutorial for another day. So we're going to go ahead and draw this in. Now, the rule for the pupil, it should never go outside of the iris. You might find instances where it does, but for me, just kind of generically speaking, there's no reason it should be outside of it. The iris and the pupil can be outside of the white space, but the pupil shouldn't go outside the iris because it'll just look strange. So you can see there it is. I am barely keeping it inside, but it is inside. Control F, Control C, Control F again to create the shines on her eyes. Again, these are not obviously perfect circles, but we're going to adjust what we have already. And Control F is just a nice feature because it pastes it directly one layer up from its previous layer that you copied from. So you can see each of these have been pasted in order, ascending order from each other, which is very nice. Alright, this is moving closer to an actual circle. Not quite. And don't fret too much about the shine. While it is important, you don't have to get it quite exact. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this a while, which I just did Control S. You won't ever see me do file save because it's just too much time. And don't worry, I've not yet forgotten about AJ's freckles. I love freckles, so I will definitely be drawing those momentarily. And I am going to put them on the same layer as the eye. That's why I've waited to draw them to this point. So, we have AJ's eye set up. We have our eyelashes, we have the pupil, the shine, iris, everything. But obviously, even if we were to turn the opacity back to 100%, then this would still look terrible. So, now we need to learn the trick. So, this can be somewhat difficult. Again, that's why the eye is my least favorite part. But you need to pay very close attention to what I'm about to do. And again, as I keep mentioning, there are different ways to do this, but I find this to be the most efficient. So you're going to go up to something called transparency here. It's next into your color and gradient. And what we're going to do is I'm going to select a solid black fill. I'm going to switch to my pen tool. And what needs to happen here is we need to make sure that the pupil and iris cut off where her eye ends while keeping that perfect shape of a circle that we already drew. Trying to guess it usually does not end up very pretty. So, you can either kind of eye it up, pun intended, yes, sorry. Or you can, there's another trick I'll probably show you in a second here, but if you're just eyeing it up, all you have to do is click, starting from this outer eyelash here, or whatever you want to call this, and kind of just try to make that perfect curve. You want to end, I should lock that, I apologize. Make sure you lock your eyelash here, and go to the very tip of that, so right there, keeping that line you're drawing now within the eyelash, and then trying to mimic where the eye ends as best as possible. This will take more than one anchor, I can almost guarantee you, each time. But if you're trying to just line it up here, you're going to follow as best you can the outside like this. And just kind of draw haphazardly around here, making sure you engulf the entire part of the eye that's going outside here. So, now that you have that drawn, what you do is you select that shape, that black shape we just drew, and then hold and shift and click on every other part of your eye you've drawn previously. Should be almost always 5 unless they have extra shine or so forth. Go back to transparency. It should show you everything you have selected here. We're going to click Make Mask. Now everything disappears. Don't panic. Go back up here. Do not hit release. You're going to uncheck the clip box. And then you'll notice, though it's not going to be perfect, because again, I was just kind of eyeing it up, it actually cut off right along that edge that we drew with our black shape. And then if you go back, it is now grouped together. Nothing really you can do about that, but nothing. So double click, change the transparency of our shapes back to 100%, and there we have our eye, at least one of them. So it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. So that is the one method for drawing the eye. Another way you can do it, if I go back and undo everything here. Okay, I'm going to actually delete our shape. As painful as that is for me to undo all of that. So, method 2. This is going to be a more precise method, but it's not always going to be your best option because it's situational. But let me show you what I mean here. So, you're going to take the actual outer eye, the white part that you've drawn before. We're going to go ahead and do, again, that Control-C, Control-F for paste in front. Now, I'm going to double-click on this, and to isolate it into that isolation mode, I'm going to hit C. C is your scissors tool, or your cutting tool, if you will, and clicking on any part of this path will splice the shape at that point, basically creating an anchor, but also separating the paths to that anchor. So we're going to find a point well outside of where our pupil and iris are, going up here, doing the same for that. And then we have two different shapes now. We have this part and this part, as you can see how they're separated. So we don't need this top part anymore, so we're just going to delete that. And we're going to take this part of the eye. We're going to go ahead and change that to our black fill a while. And 100%. And now, you go back to your pen tool. You see that /. We actually want that this time. We want to continue from that shape we already have. You're going to draw, just kind of haphazardly around like I showed you before. Oh, and hold an Alt for that, because we don't want it to change our shape from before. And now, if we exit isolation mode, first of all, make sure to take this out of the group if it was in it. But more importantly, it needs to be on top of everything else. As you can see, when I draw it on top of everything else, that is the perfect shape around our eye. Now, the only thing we're going to have to adjust, and again, this is the situational part, is how her eyelash kind of cuts in past the white part of her eye. So we're actually going to have to take the plus sign here, and we're going to have to draw, or excuse me, add in a point right next to where her eyelash ends pretty much. And then we can actually select the path. We should be able to select the path. Maybe not. Maybe it won't let us. Okay, well, ignoring that, we're just going to drag the anchor then on this part and then change the curve holding Alt to make sure it conforms to the eye that we have, the eyelash, and there you go. And so now, if we, again, select our black shape and the rest of our eye, go back to transparency, click Make Mask, unclip that clip, and we will actually have a more perfect shape. And again, really quick, you notice if you just select the whole group here, it shows opacity at 100%. You have to go into isolation mode. I'm not exactly sure why it does that, but it does. And clicking all your shapes at once, actually, I can show you this. If we try to shift-click all our shapes, it changes to 100% again. So you have to do it in segments, usually just 2 parts. Just do the pupil and the shines, and then the iris and the outside part, 100%. And then this shape is just perfect. It looks great. The only part that's kind of iffy is going to be our eyelash, the point where our eyelash meets that eye. We're going to have to probably adjust that later to make sure the curve looks more perfect. But I'm going to go ahead and save that, because if you see here, when we turn our fill back on, it's much more nicely rounded right around this area here, which is nice. And again, we're not done, because yes, there is the highlights in their eye that we'll have to add momentarily. But I'm going to go ahead and draw this other on the far side, which can be even more difficult. I'm sure that's not what you want to hear, but it's the truth. So we're going to make sure we select that. I'm going to change it to with profile 4. So you can see it tapers off like it's supposed to. This would probably be a good instance where we should adjust our shape here for our eye, just because there's really no going back at this point. So I'm going to change it slightly so it's not as steep of a curve going into her eye. It looks more natural. And we can notice, we notice here the fill doesn't quite reach this. I'm going to probably adjust this to 2-point width. So then it almost does. Still using, oh, there we go. Okay, so pretty much the same procedure as before. This shouldn't be 3-point width. I apologize. And what we're going to do is you can either, again, control paste, or you can just draw a completely new ellipse. Okay, let's collapse all these. Oh, make sure I unlock that, because when you collapse it, if it's locked, you can't actually tell that it is, because it's sort of like a sublayer, just part of it. Control save, and we have our eyes drawn, except for, again, the highlights, which we're going to be doing right now. And again, you can, if you turn off the body fill, you can turn on and off the eyes to see how close you got with it. We didn't do too bad of a job here, but it's not so terrible. Okay, so let's go ahead. Before we even do the shine marks on our eyes, I'm just going to do her freckles really quick. Alright, now back to the highlights in her eyes. This, again, there's multiple ways of doing this. You can do the same method that I just showed you, where you could draw, let's just go here, shiny parts of her eyes on the reference pages here. Copy this, trying to go as quickly as I can for you guys. Though you might not want me to. In that case, I apologize. But okay, let's go ahead and turn off this this grouping here. So one way you can do this, and you might like this way best, switch this to the proper fill. Just kind of eye this up here, make a line. Do not curve this, do not click and hold, because it's straight and then curved. But again, you don't even have to curve the second part either, this in this method, so to speak. And this isn't going to be perfect. It's hard because it's so blurry. This is why I usually want the ponies in your screenshots to be as zoomed in, as close to the screen as possible. So that way, when you're trying to work with the small details like this, it's not all pixely and you don't have to guess as much. I'm going to sample the second part of her eye. And starting, after we change our fill, starting from the point we have on our other part here, so that way they are exactly even. Gonna go ahead and about like that. Okay, so this is method 1, or actually method 2. I usually use the other one because it's quicker, but for this, okay, we have our shapes drawn. We can actually turn back on the visibility here. Now what we're gonna do is that method I just showed you before to get that perfect shape. All you have to do is we're going to go into here, select this, because it's, though it looks like it's cut off, the whole shape, the entire shape is still here. And we're going to paste that in front. You can see that. And then we're going to go ahead and we'll need to take, actually, this will be a good way to show you this. I'm going to copy both of these, paste in front. Okay, so another really neat trick that I have learned through my days in Illustrator. This little icon here called Pathfinder, it's two squares overlapping each other. Go ahead and extend that open. Now we have two shapes here. If I click on this one and this shape, our iris is in front of the white part, and there's a nice little thing you can do here to make pretty neat shapes. You can go to something called minus front, and if we click this, what it does is subtract the shape that was in front of the one behind and kind of just like cookie cutter out that section and leave only what's left behind, what's outside of that shape. So we actually have this perfect kind of crescent shape here. Hint, hint, this would be perfect for Luna's moon. QD mark. And we can actually use this shape now, as well as our shape we have here, to do the same thing with our highlights. So I'm going to actually make these the same color, and then I'm going to group them together, because they have, I don't know if they have to be grouped together, but it's easier this way. And we're going to go, again, I don't want color, to our Pathfinder, do minus front. And my mistake, you can't do two shapes in one unless I group these together again. I could group these together, and then it should. No, I apologize. I'm lying to you. So what you're gonna have to do, copy Control F to paste in front, and you'll just have to do this twice. So first of all, ungroup these again. Click on your group shapes here. Select this one, minus front. Again, since we copy paste, there's two copies of this, minus front. And you have pretty much a perfect shape here. Again, so this is the most precise method for doing their highlights. It looks pretty good. But the other method you could do would be, you'd almost have to, again, just change this transparency back to 50%. I'm going to actually change this to, let me just turn off its visibility. And then you can see, oh man, we're going to have to tune this to 20. You can see very blurrily the highlights here. And you just kind of have to eye it up. You'd, again, since we have snap to point and smart guides, click on the path of your circle here. Go to the path of your outside path of your iris. Click once, don't curve it. Now go to the part where it looks like it ends on the far side, and now you click and curve and just kind of line up that curve. Then click again. Click here. Click and curve. Doesn't have to be exact, you can adjust the handle later. So right about that. And you pretty much get the same result. I'm not going to draw both for this, again, the sake of time. We're going to increase this back up to 100. And you can see there, it's really not that bad. It looks pretty much the same as we had before. But again, if you're one of those people who want 100% precision, even if you can't really tell the difference, delete that. Then you can do the method I showed you first. So save that. Okay, so the only other thing before we complete this part of our eye, again ignoring the fact that we haven't done all of our line work properly, we're going to go back to our reference sheet. Almost every pony has a gradient for their eye. They have two colors, the bottom part and the top part. So we're going to sample from the top part now, since we had already done the bottom. And then we're going to go and select the iris. Make sure you go into isolation mode for this group, so it's going to bring up the entire group of 5 shapes. Click on the iris. It tells you it's got that green fill color that we did before. And you go to the gradient over here. Now, what we do, after it opens up this little panel here, it's naturally white to black. You click and drag your fill that you already have set. And there we go. And then you can click and drag the white shape off. And move this down to the far side. Now, if you see how there's that little plus sign next to my arrow, when I hover it close to the edge of my little swatch slider, that creates a duplicate, so I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to drag this shape off, the black shade. Now we double click on our gradient slider. And then again, here's our lovely hexadecimal value. Control V. We'll paste that color that we did before. You can just hit enter. And then that changes this gradient slider to that color that's supposed to be the top part of our eye. Now, as you can see here, the generic angle is 0%. This is important. So it just goes from left to right, from light to dark. And that is not how their eye works. So you're going to want to change this to 90% angle, so it's top to bottom. And then we can click off of that, and we have a gradient for our eye. That's simple. And then her eye is pretty much done. Now, there are some that are more complicated than that, again. But for now, I like what we have. Alright, so I'm just going to do the same for the other eye here. That is just me doing it very quickly. I'm not going to worry too much about how accurate it is, because again, I'm just teaching you how to do things right now. I'm not trying to create the perfect vector, admittedly. And just don't think because we did that that you can't go in and edit these things already. As you saw when I double clicked on the eye, you can actually go in here and change the shape around however you want. It's not permanent. And of course, you can always go, and if you want to change that shape, if you accidentally messed up on the outline or something, you can go back to transparency here for our eye, since we did that way. And hitting release will make that black shape you drew appear again, and you can adjust it and remake the mask. So hopefully I didn't confuse you with that. Hopefully I didn't go too quickly for it. The second part of her eye here, you can actually sample just with eye, and that will actually apply the gradient to the other eye. All you have to do is change the angle. Make sure you don't forget that. I'm going to save that. Okay, and her eyes are pretty much done. That will be the end of our tutorial, at least this part of our tutorial. Save here. So we finished her eyes for the most part, and we drew her freckles. So our AJ is coming along actually very nicely now. Only a few adjustments left to make, and when we turn off our original background picture, she doesn't look super creepy anymore, which is good. Wouldn't want that. So thanks again. Tune in for the next and probably last part of this in-depth tutorial of Adobe Illustrator. So have a great day.